This tutorial video is aimed at building an understanding of transportation processes and transportation process editing. We'll first do a quick review of the function of a transportation process, then take a look at the features of the transportation process editor, and finally we'll practice editing a transportation process. If you've already watched the video about stationary process editing, you're familiar enough with how processes fit into the GREET lifecycle model, and if you haven't watched that video, I recommend watching it at some point. We'll pick up now with a brief review of what exactly occurs within a transportation process. Unlike with a stationary process, in a transportation process, the resource or product being modeled is not transformed. Instead, what we're doing is accounting for the energy and emissions resulting from transporting the resource or product between locations. Lifecycle energy consumption and emissions that occur in a transportation process are the result of fuel used by the transport modes. A small percentage of total process energy or emissions might come from losses, which could occur from leakage or evaporation of gases to the atmosphere, or from extra product being transported to make up for a loss. Let's look at a transportation process to survey the features of the transportation process editor. Let's go to the Data Editors pane. We'll click on Processes, then Modify Process. In the name field, type Conventional Jet Fuel, and then open the transportation process called Conventional Jet Fuel. We have 4 frames. The main frame is where we view and edit the process. Typically, a process will contain one or more locations linked to one or more modes using connecting arrows, and locations and modes can simply be dragged and dropped into the editing frame. Moving to the top left, we have the locations frame. There are 4 categories of locations which can be expanded to see lists of specific locations. You can also add a new location, assign it an image, and add it to a category. It's important to remember that locations don't have any bearing on energy consumption or emissions. They're just placeholders or nodes between which products or resources are being transported. It's the distances between locations that affect energy and emissions, and we'll see how to edit those in just a minute. The next frame below is the modes frame, and there are a number of transportation modes available here. After dropping a mode into the editing frame, we can double-click on it and open a parameters window to edit the distance traveled by the mode, its mode share, its fuel share, energy intensity, etc. The last frame at the bottom of the screen tells us the process name, what resource is being transported, and notes about the process. There's also a button to edit output losses, which is done the same way as in the stationary process editor. And there's the Add as New and Apply buttons. Now we can add a new transportation process and build an example. Let's add a new transportation process in the Data Editors pane. When the process editor opens, we have a blank editing frame to start building our process. Toward the top are some simple instructions. Select resource transported, drag and drop modes and locations, and connect them together. Following these steps, we'll first select the resource, and we have a drop-down menu containing a list of resources where we can choose one. Let's go with crude oil. The density of the resource will have some effect on the energy consumption and emissions resulting from the process, which is why we specify what it is. We can see that once the resource is selected, a check appears next to the first instruction at the top. Now let's drag in some locations and modes. We'll start with the geographical location called US 48, representing the contiguous United States. Then we can drag in a pipeline, a barge, and rail. You might have noticed that a check appeared next to the second instruction when the location and modes are dragged in. Next, we'll drag in a petroleum refinery, which we can find under plants in the locations frame. To complete the process, we need to connect the locations and modes, and to do that we have to drag the cursor over the right side of an icon until a blue box appears. Then click and hold inside the box and drag an arrow over to a blue box on an adjacent icon. And we can do that for all of the connections. Now the instructions at the top have disappeared because the process is built. If left in this state, the process won't generate any energy use or emissions, so we have to specify some parameters for each mode, since it's the modes that account for energy and emissions in a transportation process. We can start with the pipeline by double-clicking on its icon. We'll set the distance at 800 miles and the share at 75%. Let's also change the fuel to NG plus electricity. If we want to edit some fuel parameters for this mode, we can click the link at the bottom of the parameter window. This might be useful if you want to add a different fuel share or fuel mix than what is preloaded in the menu. When we're done editing here, we can click Apply. Next, let's edit the parameters for the barge. We'll set a distance of 300 miles, and we'll set the share at 25%. Then click Apply. Now we have a transportation process that transports crude oil from locations in the United States to a petroleum refinery via pipeline and barge. Because we didn't specify distances or shares to the rail mode, it won't contribute to the process results. Let's name the process New Crude Oil Process and click Add as New, and we've just created a new transportation process in Greet. In the next video, I'll show how to add our new transportation process to a new pathway, then view the results for that pathway, and view the results for our new process. But that's it for this video, and as always, thanks for watching.